Hi, how are you? This is Sir Jet, and welcome to another episode of the History Lectures. Today we will talk about the historian's tools. Okay? So last time we talked about the sources of history. Now, how do we go about working with those sources that we have dug up? How do we process them and turn them into history? So today we will learn the tools that historians use, and there are three. Okay? Now in SS32 we will use these tools, and we call them contextual analysis. That's one. Number two is content analysis, and number three is comparative analysis. So as you can see, there's no memorization in the list, because historians, and I'm going to train you to be one, uses analysis. Okay? And there are three types of analysis that we will be learning today. They are like tools. So if you're a carpenter, you would have a hammer and a saw, okay, screwdriver probably, and if you are a baker, you would have your own tools also. Now, how about historians? These are the tools of the historian. Okay, so let's go now and focus on them one by one. Alright, the tools for working here in SS32. Okay, there. So, the first on our list is contextual analysis. The root word here is context. So, what is context? Or what is contextual analysis? It is studying the social, political, historical, and cultural background. You underline the word background because background means context. Okay? For you to better understand your material. Okay? For example, you found a diary or an old book like Noli Me Tangere. Okay, so this is a primary document written by Jose Rizal himself. Now this is the original copy, and it's handwritten. Okay, and you found it, and now you're going to do contextual analysis. So when you say contextual analysis, you will focus on the background of that material, represented by this circle. And the background of Noli Me Tangere is it was written in the 1800s. That's more than 100 years ago. So contextual analysis involves the investigation of the events around the book. Okay? The events that happened in the 1800s and what influence it did on our material. Okay? So, you investigate what is the social condition in that time. What is the political condition? Okay? What is the cultural condition when that material was written? Now, in the case of Noli Me Tangere, for an example, we will look at the politics. What was happening in the 1800s politically here in the Philippines? So we can get such answers like, oh, we were not a free country during that time. So that is the political situation. Now, what are the historical events that happened around that time? Okay, so if you're familiar with your history, the Gomburza happened a decade before the Noli was written. and that the death of the Gomburza was a real shocker during that time, and that influenced Jose Rizal to write his novels. Now, another thing that we will try to find out when doing contextual analysis is studying the culture that surrounds the novel. So we can see there how the people dressed up, okay, what language they speak, what are their traditions in the 1800s, okay, the time when the material was written. So we can find out that the people wore the Maria Clara dress, okay, and then they don't have electricity, so at night it's very dark, so they don't go out much at night, they sleep early. They are very, very religious Catholics. So that's the culture that's prevalent in the 1800s, okay, etc., etc. So that's how we do contextual analysis. We look at the picture, the surrounding events and the circumstances, situation around the novel, and this in one way or the other influenced our material. So if you're the historian and you're doing contextual analysis, you want to answer the following, like who wrote the text, okay? Who's the author? What do we know about him? What's his background? What's his job? What's his previous experiences? How about his family? Okay, so you try to answer as many questions about the author, and then you may want to ask about the author's background. You want to ask about also his target audience. Okay, who is he writing for? Okay, like for example, Rizal wrote his writings not really for the Filipinos but for the Spaniards, okay, for them to see themselves like looking at the mirror. Or the Magellan's friend, when they were traveling here in the Philippines, Magellan's friend was writing for the King of Spain. Okay, so you try to find out who is the target audience. And why did he write this? What is the motive of the author? Okay? Just for documentation or for propaganda or something else? And when and where was the text written? Describe the prevailing conditions. Okay, just like what we have done a while ago in the previous slide. So that is contextual analysis. Okay, next, number 2 tool that historians use is content analysis. Okay, so the root word here is content. Okay, what is inside the document? So you will try to find interesting and meaningful pieces, okay, inside the document by systematically reading it. So that means you will read the material in between the lines and you will not use any outside source. Okay? So we just look at the outside of the document in contextual analysis. We look at the background. But here in content analysis, you don't look at the background anymore, but you just focus on the text itself. Okay? You read between the lines. You analyze how it is structured. Now, for example, the Noli Me Tangere document, once again, okay, what can we derive from it? What clues about history can we get by reading between the lines or reading intently, line by line of the Noli? So one question that we can try to see is how many pages talked about a revolution? Okay, so for example, the Noli has 200 pages and it has 110 pages that mentioned the word revolution. Okay, so that means, wow, that's more than half of the novel mentioning the word revolution. So this novel must be revolutionary. Okay, you can conclude that. Doing content analysis, or you count how many bad priests were mentioned. Okay, so you can count Padre Damaso, Padre Salvi, etc. And you can deduce that, whoa, during that time, priests were bad, or not all, but there were bad priests during that time. And that is a clue about the historical situation as reflected by the document. Was the main character successful based on his accomplishments? So you can see there in the ending that the revolution failed. Okay, and what does that mean? Is the author saying that revolution is not the answer to societal problems? So these are questions that help you do content analysis. And as you notice, the arrows are radiating from the document. A while ago, in contextual analysis, the arrows are pointing towards the document. But now, they are radiating away. So that means we are deducing, okay? We are trying to squeeze out, okay, some facts or historical truths about the time based on our document. So in content analysis, again, it involves reading between the lines. It involves seeing patterns within the text. Okay, so a pattern means there is a one message being said, and the paragraphs all support this one message. That is a pattern. You have to be sharp in looking for such pattern. And you figure out also what the author really intends to convey. And you draw out lessons from the text itself. So that's how you do content analysis. See, it's so different from contextual analysis. So they go hand in hand, 1 and 2. Now the third type of tool that historians use is comparative analysis. And based on the word, okay, comparative, the root word is compare. That means you will be comparing two documents or two sources, okay, that talk about the same event. Alright? So you're going to get the side of one and the side of the other. Now going to our old example, the Noli, in comparative analysis, you have to get another one. Okay, you get another document, another source that talks about the 1800s in the Philippines. So aside from Noli, maybe we can get another document called the La Solidaridad. This is a newspaper written also in the same decade or in the same period in the 1800s. Printed also in the same place, okay, in Europe, and written by the same people. Okay, Rizal was also a writer in La Solidaridad together with his friends. And so these two, we put them side by side. And we try to find a pattern. Okay, what are the common things they say? What are the things that they disagree with? Okay, and then we have an overall picture. Now, both of them, what is common is that they talk about Philippine society in the 1800s. So Noli has his own version of what Philippine society looks like. Okay, so it talks about abusive priests. It talks about Spaniards who were bad and Filipinos who were struggling and thinking about fighting the Spaniards. Okay, and La Solidaridad also has its own version of how they portray Philippine society in the same period, in the 1800s. And the same thing we can see in this case, okay, that La Solidaridad also talks about abusive Spaniards and Filipinos struggling to have some reforms, okay, from the Spaniards. Okay, so that is comparative analysis. You put the text side by side. Okay, you look for differences in what they say. You look for commonalities in what they say. And you list the details, okay, that one mentions and the other does not, and vice versa, okay, and then you will see a big lesson out of it. So those are the three tools that historians use. Let's review: contextual analysis, content analysis, and comparative analysis. Alright, so if you remember, without looking at your notes, contextual analysis looks at the background of your source. Content analysis is you draw out from your source by reading between the lines, okay, or line by line. And comparative analysis, you get another source and you compare them side by side. Alright, so now let's try doing them. I posted on Blackboard under content, okay, module 1, you can see there a PDF file, and the PDF file is about the Tabon Man, okay, and that PDF file is actually a combination of two sources. So one source is an account written by Robert Fox, okay, talking about the Tabon Man, and another author, okay, William Scott, also is talking about the Tabon Man. So we have two authors talking about the same thing, and you can find that in the document. So you may want to open it now, okay, get the Tabon Man document, browse it, and you can notice that there are little red numbers across the text, just like your Bible. Your Bible has numbers for the verses, and the document that I'm giving you also has numbers for every sentence. Okay? Now, those little numbers will be your guide in pinpointing information and answers. Okay? So now, after seeing that document, is it open now? You have it now on one side of your table. I will give you the context analysis. Okay? I will give you the background of the Tabon Man story. Okay? The background of those documents you have right now. And then after giving you the context analysis, you will now do the content analysis and the comparative analysis. So here is the context or contextual analysis. So the Tabon Man, that's how he looks like according to an artist, but we really don't know how he looks like exactly because the camera was not yet invented in his time. So we don't have a photograph of the real Tabon Man. This is just the imagination of the author or of the artist, how it looks like. And how did he get the idea? From pieces of bones, okay, that were dug up in a cave in Palawan. Okay, so there were human bones dug up in this cave, and this cave is located in Palawan. Okay, and from this primary source, which is actually an artifact, we have now an idea of the first inhabitant in the Philippines, or one of the first inhabitants in our islands. Now, here are the specific details. Okay, the excavation of the Tabon Man happened in 1962. Okay, that's a long time ago, and somebody dug it. An American who is working for the for the National Museum of the Philippines. Okay, so we have a foreigner working for the Philippine government, and he discovered the bones in Palawan. And the cave where he found the bones were filled with birds called tabon birds. So the cave has no name at that time. They gave it a name, Tabon Cave, okay, because of the many birds, the tabon birds, inside and around the entrance of the cave. Okay, so the guy who dug it is Robert Fox. Now the bones of the Tabon man, okay, that Mr. Fox found in the cave were sent to France for further investigation. Probably we don't have the equipment here in the Philippines, so the bones have to be shipped to France to confirm many questions about it. And the bones, or the bones, yeah, were analyzed, and the results came out, and these are the results of the study of the lab in France. That the bones were the oldest ones in the Philippines. No other bone dug up was older than it at that time. Okay, and the bones were older than the age, okay, or the time when the Negritos were here. So this discovery is saying that there were people who were not Negritos, and they were living in the Philippines way thousands of years before the Negritos were here. And that finding nullified the wave migration theory of Mr. Henry Bayer. Okay, now the wave migration theory, which was the prevailing truth at that time, and even up to the time when I was a little boy in school, okay, we were taught about the wave migration theory, which is actually the story about there were 3 waves of migration that came to the Philippines and resulted to the inhabitants, okay, of the archipelago, that resulted into the civilization before the coming of the Spaniards. So the wave migration theory was this is the summary. Okay, the Philippines was uninhabited at first, and then the first wave of inhabitants were the Negritos, and then after the Negritos, a second wave came, the Indonesians, or Indones, as it was told to us in our Araling Panlipunan class. And the third wave were the Malays. So 3 waves, and then the Spaniards came. That was taught in history when I was a little boy. But with the discovery and the confirmation and popularization of the Tabon Man artifacts, okay, the wave migration theory was abolished and it's no longer being taught in school because it's a historical fallacy after all. Yes, where did Mr. Bayer get that idea of the three waves? Nowhere. He just made it up. Okay? He didn't get it from any diggings or artifacts or anything. He just wrote about it. Mr. Bayer is actually, yes, he's a scientist who lived in the 1920s when the Philippines was a colony of the United States. And so what he wrote in the 1920s found its way in the history books in the next decades. Okay? 30s, 40s, 50s, up to the 70s and 80s when I was a student in elementary, okay, and high school. And so now we are trying to correct that fallacy that the wave migration is not true, because the Negritos were not the first people in the Philippines. There is proof, solid proof, one of which is the Tabon Man. Okay? So, here's more. In 2007, another excavation yielded some bones, and this time the excavation was in the Cagayan Valley. Okay? And it's in the Callao Cave in northern Luzon, and it yielded a human foot bone, this long only. Okay? So it must be a small human. Okay? Or he's not as tall as me, but the foot bone is just this long. And in 2010, the foot bone was investigated, and the results came out. Okay? So they sent it abroad for further study, and then the results from abroad came, and it confirmed that it is indeed a human foot bone. It's not a monkey bone. Okay? It's not a chicken bone, but it is a human bone. And the fantastic thing here is that the age of that foot bone is much older than the Tabon Man. And so we have another inhabitant in the Philippines before the Tabon Man, and so we call him now the Cagayan Man. So up to now, or at present, he is considered as the oldest inhabitant of the Philippines. In 2019, he was given a name, a scientific name, Homo luzonensis. And today, that is being taught in our history classes, that the oldest person in the Philippines is the Cagayan Man and his friends. Okay? Before we close, let me give you our summary for today. So what have we accomplished? Okay, number one, we have seen or enumerated and differentiated the different tools that historians use in our work. The three analysis: contextual analysis, content analysis, and comparative analysis. Okay? Number two, we tried doing it actually. Okay? By doing the seat work. So you will do your seat work now, and you will be doing number two. Okay? You will be handling the tools that historians handle. And number three, we hit another a bird with a single stone today. We talked about prehistoric Philippines. One era, okay, the beginning of the history of the Philippines, the story of the Tabon Man, okay, and then before him, the Cagayan Man. So, these are the things we have done today. Congratulations! We have learned, we have accomplished so much. So, this has been Sir Jet saying goodbye and thank you.